Ella. Hey, 020. Okay, we're gonna wait for people to come in. I'm so excited. Hey, everybody. This is Randa, the lead consultant at Little Pro Education Group, and we are back. Hi, 2BB. 33. Hey, Blow. Hey, Ill. Hey, Simone. Okay, I was trying to go live on Instagram, so we've had some changes. Hey, we've had some changes. Hi, Simon. You can actually call in because people are identified by their name on Facebook and their tags on Instagram as well as Periscope. And if they're asking a personal question, they may not want to, be exposed. And so if you look in the description box, except for on Instagram, you can actually call in the Little Pro office number. It's 203-306-9833. Awesome, Il. Welcome. So we just want to wait for a few people to come in. Hi, Bree. How are you? And tonight's topic is, are Latinos discriminated against in U.S. schools? And although we have a topic every Sunday and Wednesday, feel free to chime in if you have any specific questions regarding education. It could be regarding a child. It could be regarding, from a professional perspective, an issue that a person may be having. It could be basically anything, especially K through 12. Not so much college. I have had a few people who have asked college questions, and I was able to answer. But my specialty is, public education and private education, K through 12. Okay, so tonight's topic has been generated because I read this book, Guadalupe Quintanilla, and I have to look at the name in order to say it. My Story, Mi Historia. And it's about this woman. She's much older. She was born in 1937. And she was born in a small town in Mexico. And she lived with her grandparents, and she went to school, which is not really normal because a lot of girls don't go to school. Hey, Calandra, don't go to school in Mexico, right? They want to, raise, especially during that time, raise the girls to be good wives and housekeepers, right? And so her family, hey, Joy, her family sent her to school, and she was at the top of her class. She had a lot of accolades and all that. And then the family moved with the uncle to the deep south in a rural area that did not have a school. They had dirt roads and no school. So her and the kids in the neighborhood actually played school, and she was the teacher in the school because she knew, the information. She knew how to write. She knew how to do arithmetic and all that. She also worked in the family store, and she's the one at a little age of 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. She would call, hey Stacy, hey RJ. She would call the suppliers, and she would converse with them. And she would give change to customers as well as the suppliers. So she was doing arithmetic. So she was extremely smart, right? And then her grandfather started to go blind. And so she would read Reader's Digest, the Spanish version stories. She would read stories from, hi, Gab. She would read stories about Mexican history to her grandfather. So this is a really bright girl, right? And then her family moves to the United States. And she moves to Brownsville, Texas. And of course, the family is, loving this new opportunity and is going to send their granddaughter to the American school for a better opportunity. She goes and enrolls, and they give her an IQ test in English. Hey, Hassan. Hey, Dave. Hola, Hassan. Hassan is from Cuba. Hi, David. And they give her, hey Jonas, they give her an IQ test in English. And of course, she just came from Mexico. She doesn't even know English. So she's totally confused. She does the best that she can. And they deemed her unintelligent. She could not be educated. So they put her in a first grade classroom. She was 12 years old. They put her in a first grade classroom. So she's feeling horrible. The teachers are ignoring her. They will only send her on errands to bring the little kids to the bathroom, to run errands to the office, to put up bulletin boards. And she was always sitting there hoping that, the teacher would give her, something academic to do and, really just guide and lead her. Hi, 68. And they never did. And so she was like really depressed. This was a girl who was at the top of her class in Mexico. And then in the United States, they just totally messed up her whole education. And now she doesn't even want to be there. Like she's just treated like, if you think about it, that's servitude. Her 12 years old. Hey, her 12 years old in a first grade classroom. Right? So she tells her grandparents she doesn't want to go to school no more. And in Mexico, you didn't have to go to school, right? So they were like, okay, because, if she told them, what was happening, they would not believe her because they're old school, parenting. The teacher is right. The teacher is the professional. And there's so many people, there's so many people today that still have that mentality. Hey, David, that the educator, the schools are correct. They know what they're doing, right? So her grandparents allowed her to drop out of school. She continued to work, with the family and read to her grandfather. Hi, Eminem. And she was extremely bright. And so then, they really raised her to be a good wife. And she got married. She had 3 kids. And then her kids went to school. So she's thinking next generation, boom, they're going to be better than her. She's going to give them all the opportunities. She enrolls them in school. And then when she goes to the school, she notices that her kids are designated in the lower level groups. So a lot of you, especially older people, a lot of schools don't have that today. A lot of schools have gotten rid of it, but some schools still have it, where you're tracked into a particular level based upon what they think your academic ability is. Hey, Bronze. And they were in the lower level group. And she was like, oh no. She was getting their report cards, and the report cards were horrible. And so her worst nightmare is coming true. And so she talked to the teachers about, and feel free if you have a question, a personal question about education, and you want to answer the question of tonight, feel free to jump in. And so she went to be at teacher conference night, and she talked to the teachers, and the teachers were clueless. They were just like, they're not capable of the academic work. And so, she just tried to search for an answer. And so one of the teachers suggested that she only speak English at home, and that'll help them learn the language better. So she was like, how? She enrolls in college. She does extremely well. She works hard. Graduating. She becomes a professor. She becomes a U.S. representative to the UN, and she owns her own business. She speaks with her kids at home in English. That does increase their ability to do well in school, but she could also communicate with the people at school. And she was able to assist her kids. And not only did she have those accolades, but her children are all professionals too. Not to say that professional jobs are better than any other type of jobs. They can still be in other jobs and still be professional, but she raised 1 doctor and 2 lawyers, which takes a lot of academic work. Hi, Carla. Which takes a lot of academic work. So if you think about it, American School said she could not be educated and put her in first grade and totally neglected her education. The same cycle was about to happen to her kids until she shifted into gear and she did her thing. Hey, she did her thing, and she helped her kids where the teacher says they couldn't handle the academic work. These are the professionals who said that they could not handle the academic work, but yet and still, they're in a very intense academic major, law and medicine, right? Hi, Mon. Welcome. And so this really shows, and although this is a really old school case scenario and things have changed with ESL and ELL in schools, there is still educational neglect that is happening. So if you, excuse me, are of Latino descent or you have friends and family that are Latino descent, check in on them, especially if they're generation 0 or generation 1. Other generations, even if they're American citizens, of course, they still face trials and tribulations within schools. And so I asked this question, are Latinos discriminated against in U.S. schools? For me, it's an obvious yes, right? But for other people, it's not always obvious. And that's a part of the discrimination, being invisible. Oh, my things came down. So don't mind the pigtails. I had it pulled back. And so I asked the question on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and something else, Snapchat. So I'm going to go to some of the responses and read them. Hey, Daniel, if you want to chime in at any time, feel free to do so. Hi, Trudy. If you want to call in, if you don't want to be identified, feel free to call in. The number is in the description box, 203-306-9833. Hey, Big Lee. And you can ask questions or make a statement from there. If you have a personal issue, feel free to jump in. That it doesn't have to do anything with the topic. So every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, we give free educational consulting. On Sundays and Wednesdays, we usually have a topic, but you don't have to stick to the topic, right? Because we're here to help. So if you have a concern for a child or for an educator, or if you're an educator and you're having particular difficulties in a particular area and you want some support, just shout it out. All your likes, comments, and shares are appreciated. Okay, let me see. Okay, Lady K on Snapchat said, I have seen some being oppressed and some being the oppressors. Anything from playful jabs calling Latinos Mexican when they're not, to actually calling immigration on them and causing unnecessary harassment. At my last apartment, a Homeland Security truck was parked outside the complex for weeks because someone was making anonymous phone calls about suspicious residents. I also see the Americanized Latinos joining in on the bullying, and it's disheartening. Hi, Miguel. So that's from Lady K on Snapchat. I thought that was a really brilliant response, very thorough, calling, some Latinos oppressed because of the discrimination that they face and the hardships, especially underneath this administration with the new rules regarding immigration and the call for ICE to go after people who may be here illegally. And then also calling out maybe more established, hey, Wade, Latinos who don't want to be a part or associated with other Latinos who are newly immigrants and join in on the bantering. And so if you think about kids going to school, I mean, we all know about bullying, which is really extreme. But even when a child is not bullying or a child is not being bullied, kids can be cruel. It just may be one comment. And that can make a person just feel awful. And in this current socio-political climate, I can imagine how people feel. And, I understand when people, hi Kazam, hi 06, I understand, the pressures of not wanting to be a part of the new group. But that's no excuse, right? There's no excuses for that. That was a great one, Lady K. I'm going to go to some more on Snapchat. Okay, Mikhail says, yes, they are always discriminated against, made out to be lesser than another race, which is far from true. So she's acknowledging that Latinos are discriminated against, that they are compared to other races, but she does not agree. That she thinks it's far from true. She didn't go into any particulars. Something came to mind when she said that. Something came to mind and I can't pick up on it. Jason, who was from the UK, says that it's difficult to say as a Londoner, but from the footage and clips shown in the UK, Latinos are given a bad rep by the media. And I thought that was an interesting take. Hey, Zanab, that was a really interesting take. Because he's not even from the United States, but he sees the role, hey Hassan, that the media plays in disseminating images of people and how it impacts people's view of them. And so I was teaching this course, African American Studies, and in this course, for the midterm, they had to write a persuasive essay based upon information that they had learned, from the beginning of the course to that time, as well as we did a film and stereotype lesson prior to the midterm, and we went over several stereotypes of various groups. So although we were focusing on Black stereotypes, we also got into the Italian stereotype, Latino stereotype, Irish stereotypes. We went through different ethnic groups within the United States. And for Latinos, that's the stereotype is, I'm an immigrant, I can't hardly speak English, I'm trying to make my way up and make myself better, and there's always a white savior to always help them, and some of these stereotypical themes go through, hi Doug, hi Remington, go through different, ethnic groups, right? And so that perception in the media, whether it's movies, whether it's television, whether it's, in periodicals, it's there. And if you are not Latino, or even if you are Latino, or you're a person who is not Latino and you don't come into contact with many Latinos, you don't have a full breadth, right? So you could be making decisions, based upon the knowledge that you learned in the media. And I thought that was a really interesting take from Jason from London. Tyrone from Snapchat said, honestly, now that you say it, I never seen nor heard of it, me personally. And then he asked whether I've seen it or not. And I said, of course, I'm not blind. I'm an educator, right? And so I worked in school systems that had Latinos in every single last school system. The smallest percentage, hi Hassan, hi man, hi HP. The smallest percentage I ever worked with was 5%, right? And so, again, I said this earlier, invisibility, hey Elsie, invisibility is discrimination. When you don't even notice that people are going through things, it's discrimination, right? And I can tell you stories at places where I taught. And the Latino population was rising from 5% to 8% to 10%. So there was a lot of incoming Latinos. And some of them did not speak English, even if they were from Puerto Rico. They didn't speak English. And so they went to ESL or ELL, and then they're around other Latinos. So of course they're going to speak their language. And you will have white American, non-Latino teachers telling them forcefully, don't speak Spanish, speak English, right? And so you're really taking them outside their comfort zone. It's different if you're in the middle of an English lesson, and if a person speaks Spanish, you politely tell them, translate that into English, right? But when you stop people from communicating in their native tongue and having that social, that chance to socialize within the classroom, that's discrimination. I have seen teachers who have told students of Latino descent, and these white American teachers who learned Spanish as a second language, mostly within a school system, within college, tell them that they don't speak Spanish correctly. How do you tell someone of Latino descent that they do not speak Spanish? Did I say English? I hope I said Spanish. They do not speak Spanish correctly. Okay. So this is what I teach my kids. No matter who's in the classroom, everybody gets this education. Language is forever changing. Okay? Your environment, time, all that, everything makes language very fluid. And so, hey Jason, long time no see. And so historically in empires, because empires were very big and expansive, your far-reaching territories who could have spoken your language, because language is forever changing, ends up years later speaking a whole nother language, and you can't do business, you can't collect taxes because you can't communicate. So that's when empires started to have their scribes standardize the language, right? And then teach in schools the language and say that, well, here are the rules. So that's somebody putting a cap on what's actually natural for language to change. So now we fast forward to colonialism and different European groups taking control of different areas in the world, and these are people of color. And in the Americas, you have people of Native, African descent and European descent who are mixing together, who are now speaking various European languages, and many of them in the Americas, North America, what we call Central America, what we call South America, are speaking Spanish, right? And so the way that a person in the Dominican Republic speaks Spanish and a person in Cuba is going to be different because language evolves. They bring everything that they have culturally and they bring that into the language. People in Mexico and Puerto Rico speak Spanish differently. One way is not better than the other. But because these white teachers are teaching and speaking European Spanish, it is totally oppressive to tell young Latino minds that they do not speak, hey, Lorene, correctly. That is systemic, right? And it's different when you say, okay, we are going to learn in this course, we are going to reinforce the European standard of Spanish. Love the way you speak, but we're going to learn the standardized language so that no matter where you go in the world, you can communicate with other people who speak Spanish, right? There's a lot of Latinos whose first language is Spanish, but never went to a Spanish-speaking school and only went to English-speaking schools, so they don't know a lot of times the rules that go along with it. They understand it. They can write it. They can read it, but they don't know the standardized language schools. And it's just using those simple terms, right? Being very honest, upfront, and frank. Why do you have to discriminate, right? So you have teachers discriminating, you have this, systemic discrimination, then you have kids, going in on the discrimination, right? And then you have this political climate that's allowing it to like completely flourish, right? And so these kids, especially new immigrants, it doesn't matter what their citizenship status is. They're catching it. And so I was working at this one school, and this kid from, Mexico was, outside at recess. I didn't have recess duty. I didn't have recess duty at all. And so they were with other adults. And so there was a whole commotion and almost a fight. And this young sixth grader Mexican student was in tears. I mean, he was, like really sobbing. And the other student, just like, I think it was Lady K said, the other kid was not black, was not white, was not red, was not yellow, was another brown child who was Puerto Rican and I think Colombian. I think his father was Puerto Rican and his mother was Colombian. Called him a dirty Mexican, right? And so this kid could not synthesize that, a lot of groups are discriminated against. He just knew his pain. He just knew how his family was looked upon. He just knew that. And that this kid triggered that and made him so emotionally hurt. I mean, the kid couldn't even talk. He was crying, "Hi, Tremblay." The kid couldn't even talk, right? So this is something that is going on so many levels. And I've been teaching since the 90s. So this is nothing new. Okay, what else is being said on Facebook? Scotty says, yeah, I was in school with Latino kids. They were always being seen as gang members and were not allowed to be in groups, or if they spoke Spanish around each other, a white teacher will tell them to speak English. Didn't I say it? Didn't I say it? Right? Right here. Scotty, she said it. Yes, girl. Right? So it's like, where's the sensitivity training, for these teachers? And so as parents, we have to be on the ball. We have to teach our kids how to navigate these systems and, how to, make sure that they are okay. because a lot of these kids, especially in the inner city, hi Magno, are in a war zone. You know, they're in an emotional, political war zone, right? My niece-in-law said they called them names. They treated them like they were different. You know, very short and simple. You know, and I remember when I was in high school, there were two groups of Latinos. There were well, actually, I say three groups. There were the Latinos that hung with the black kids. Hey, Mohammed. There were, hi, Tamara. There were Latinos. You can't find my Instagram? It's Tenacious Teachers. Tenacious _ sorry everybody, hold on. Teachers. There, I put it in the chat. Okay, so there was the Latinos that hung with the black kids, and they're very urbanized. There were Latinos that hung with the white kids, and they were very mainstream. Hi, Cleveland. And then there were the Latino kids that only hung with Latino kids and mostly spoke Spanish, you know, and sat together, you know, at lunch, right? And so, you know, a lot of times those kids who did not meld in with other groups were always deemed invisible. People didn't know their names. People didn't know their stories or anything like that, right? And so there's been a lot to go with that. My next book that I'm going to read is Esmeralda Santiago. I've been meaning to read this for years. When I was Puerto Rican, if you think about the title, it's an oxymoron, because once you're Puerto Rican, you're always Puerto Rican. So it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. So she's from Puerto Rico, and she did all things Puerto Rican. Hi, Chi. And her mother ends up moving to the United States, to New York of all places, with 7 kids, and ended up having 4 more kids, right? And they were impoverished, but, you know, they were thriving in Puerto Rico, right? Because there's a lot of, like, you know, land and, you know, food that is natural, and it's a whole different beast once you get to the United States. And so this little girl had to go through a lot here in the United States. And so those stories, you know, a lot of times people are invisible, you know, and invisibility is discrimination, right? Okay. Okay, Ariana on Snapchat said yes. And Ed, she didn't go into detail. Ed said, they're not here. I have not seen or heard of it here. And he lives in a small city in Baton Rouge, right? And so I'm not sure if I can believe that Latinos are not discriminated against in the state of Louisiana. Okay, thank you, Vizzy. Again, it's that invisibility factor, right? Did he just not notice? Is it something that he's not aware of, conscious of? Because we all become conscious of something at some point or another. And Matt, this is another international perspective, which is very interesting. Matt is from Australia, and he says, well, in Australia, we have a pretty racist norm that unfortunately has been an all too familiar story of European colonization. Hi, Assassin. The plight of our indigenous peoples are very similar to the story of the indigenous peoples in the U.S. From an outsider's point of view on the U.S., I see a very divided country with some really terrible and blatant racism on display from people with power. I fear the U.S. is imploding with this divide. And I would have to really agree with Matt, and he's not even here. And again, he can see the climate of the country. Now, think about it, if you're a child in the school in this climate. I was actually not in school the day after the election where Trump won the election, but colleagues of mine said that the school, and this was a highly populated Black and Latino school, we served an inner city, and he was like, it was sullen. These kids were upset because of the campaign that he ran, and so how divisive and negative it is. What does this mean for them? So one of my colleague friends decided to dress up really spiffy just to give them a visual that what happens in Washington, who they voted in and why, does not change a thing. I am still going to prosper, right? So that's extremely, extremely interesting. Wait. So Tyrone and on Snapchat says, from my experience, it has been ingrained in society that anyone of a much darker complexion is a threat. Maybe it's not reported as much, but you don't see malice against Hispanics and Latinos as much as Black folks. This year, there's a 75,000 Black women, no national coverage. There's no national coverage. But I don't remember finding any info like that on other minority groups. Oh, missing Black women. Right. So what Tyrone is doing is what a lot of people do. They compare ethnic groups, right? And so comparing is not always fair, because don't forget the invisibility factor, right? And so when you talk about comparing Latinos to Blacks or Latinos to Native Americans, yes, it's done. But there's been visibility because of the civil rights movement, because of slavery, because of, the Black Lives Matter movement. We've had an international voice for a long time. We have been a leader in exposing discrimination in this country. We have been leaders in the arts in this country, where we don't have access to a lot of other, genres. We have access to those, and those, whether it's television, whether it's movies, whether it's music, speak. You have a voice, right? And so other ethnic groups are just coming into that, right? And a lot of ethnic groups, because the economy in the United States is white, Black, right? And everybody else historically has fallen in the center. That's the socio-political and economic dichotomy in this country, right? So again, there are groups, people who are invisible because they are not white, they are not Black, right? So it's very difficult to do comparatives. We're going to do it anyway, but it's not always fair, and doesn't mean that what you see is actually accurate. Okay, so let's go to Facebook. Facebook had some really interesting comments. Okay, so Simona says, hey, Ricardo, I have seen blatant discrimination, and I have also seen instances where they have said, they meaning Latinos, that they were being discriminated against because they were not given exactly what they may have been requesting. I have worked closely with the bilingual social worker who would turn the world inside out to assist families, only to be told she was discriminating against whomever, this was very difficult. Okay, and then I asked Simone, we call her Mona, have you all identified the reason for the outcry, right? Because sometimes you have to understand the populations in which you serve, right? And so if a person is used to discrimination and not getting a fair shake, they're going to be sensitive. They're going to be on it, right? And so you as a professional have to maneuver that. When you understand that, you maneuver that, right? And personally, I've never been accused of racism by Latinos. Hey, within the professional setting, and hopefully not in the personal setting. I don't have that experience either. Hi, Pitt. It's the way in which you carry yourself, right? Because the thing is, as a professional, you are working for that school system. So you are carrying out what that school system and their policies, and sometimes their policies are discriminatory. It may not be blatant, it's systemic, right? And so what a person feels, even though it fits within the guidelines of your job and what you have to do, doesn't mean that it's not discrimination, right? And then there's the sensitivity and frustrations, just all around for, certain people, in which they may jump to conclusions, without knowing. And so as professionals, it's our job to educate them as much as possible. But sometimes, depending on the topic, it's a little fuddy-duddy because that school system is your employer. Okay? So it's like you have to walk a fine line. At Little Pro Education Group, we can tell it. We can give you all the juice. So, like, our parents need to be like Lupita. That's what they call Guadalupe. That's her nickname, Lupita. And really just be up on it. You have to be up on it and go into these schools. Hi, Reggie. Get into these schools and know and understand these schools so that you can help your kids succeed. And Mona did say yes, that to some extent, right? So there's more to Mona's story. And Susan said, yes, there are. I've heard from parents on how after Trump was put in office, how children were crying at school, thinking they were going to be taken away, even though they were American citizens. So if you are a person of color, then you are discriminated against, because if others do it, then definitely schools do it, right? Hi, Anthony. Yes, I agree. I agree. And R said, and she had a whole document, the segregation report. There's discrimination in disciplining and academic achievement, etc. And that I have seen that as well. So statistically, for brown and black kids, there's more arrest by resource officers in schools. And Latinos are also, as well as blacks, are also targeted for stricter disciplinary action, and the academic achievement is lower. And we saw that in tonight's case study, looking at Lupita's story, right? So no matter what she did at home, it did not help her kids. Like, she had the best expectation for her kids, and then saw, like, wait a minute, they're not achieving, they're failing, right? So we gotta definitely be on it. Okay, and then I'm gonna show you this meme that R put. Okay, I don't know if you can see it. I'll show the other two groups. Ah. American Latinos and the challenges of discrimination in U.S. schools, right? And you see a little kid with a really sad face. And so think about it. If you're not emotionally okay, you're not okay. And our kids are going into schools, they're going into war zones. They're being attacked emotionally, they're being attacked politically, they're being attacked culturally, and some of it is systemic, some of it is the teachers, some of it is the kids. It's a whole barrage, right? So as parents and supporters and educators, we have to be on it. This has to be a part of our mission. So Ricardo says, I have seen college affirmative action plans that call for 5 Latino, 5 Black teaching positions. It seems that discrimination is based on the melanin spectrum. Oh, 0.5. Oh, and point. Yeah, so hey Sam. So that's kind of hard because that's affirmative action. And I'm gonna show the other platforms this meme. Hi Ask. Hey, total package, and that's the meme. Affirmative action is a little bit different because that's a governmental policy. That's not the actual school, and they're following what the government has broken down for affirmative action. And it's, hi, Ricky, and it's all based upon numbers. Hi, Marjorie, and hey, Reg. Thanks so much, Reg. And so those numbers are really funky, and that's how we know affirmative action does not work, right? Because affirmative action can still say, based upon the numbers, that you need to hire 2 white people. Affirmative action is not pro anything but patriarchy and Eurocentrism. So yeah, it's a little bit different. So Reggie said, hi, Randa, great job with the live. Keep spreading the word, peace and blessings. Thanks so much, Red. Hi, Muhammad. Hi, Gail. Hi, Jay. Victoria. Okay. So that's what R put up. And Ricky said, yes, and divided. And just to put it out there, many don't like to be called Latinos because that was used for many Europeans. I thought, actually, when he first put that, I thought he said by many Europeans because Latino comes from the root word Latin, and Spanish is Latin-based languages. And so I know that individual people don't like to be called Latino because, you know, they're Dominican, they're Puerto Rican, they're Cuban. Hi, This King. You know, they have their own national ethnic identities. But when you're talking about the collective group, many don't like Latino, many don't like Hispanic. Some people don't even know about being called brown. They don't even get that. And so when you're talking about the collective, and you're not talking about one or a few groups in a single setting, then what term do you use? Right? And so this conversation is for the collective, because across the United States, you know, you could be talking about someone who is Mexican, Peruvian, Ecuadorian, Cuban. You know, we're not talking about any one or a few particular groups where you can call them by name, right? And so, you know, if you say African American, I could be half Jamaican, you know what I mean? And I may still go by African American, or I may still go by Black. So these terms, you know, we can't, there's a lot to these terms, right? And so I understand and I respect that. But for a collective conversation, I respectfully said, you know, give me another term. And I guarantee no one can come up with a term that everybody's going to agree upon, right? Because it's going to have a history to it. Okay. And R said, I remember when I was in middle school, West Side, that's in Waterbury, Connecticut. Hi, Sean. I was only one of 2 students of color in group 1. We were reportedly higher achievers academically and were tested at higher reading levels. Weren't we talking about, grouping and tracking earlier? Guess what students made up group 3 and 4? Blacks and Hispanics. Hey, Jimmy. Okay, yeah, Jimmy, we're not doing that, Jimmy. Okay, yeah, Blacks and Hispanics. I always knew there was something wrong about this, but couldn't put it together at that age. The disparity was glaring. I can't imagine that teacher bias was a contributor. I'm sure that class also was part of this dynamic. Oh, she said it. She broke it down so brilliantly. And she is a professional and she's a social worker. And so she works with various groups and she works, she's done symposiums on education and everything. And she's also a college professor. And so for her to go back into her experience as a student of color and pull out that paradigm is absolutely brilliant. And that's why we at Little Pearl Education Group, we do this work, because much of my experience and the reason I became a teacher, an educator, and this type of educator and now educational consultant is because of those back stories, right? Those trackings and how the trackings can be identified racially. You can talk to kids, hi Fado, you can talk to kids who have existed in schools that have been tracked, and you can describe by race and number of kids in the class, the classroom, and they will be able to tell you in unison, hey DJ, what level class it is. Okay, so this is not just professionals just yapping. Hi, Ivan. Just yapping and just talking. This is real. Kids can identify these things, right? So if these kids can speak these things, what are their brains picking up about themselves and each other? That they're not smart. Hi, Smiles. That they're not capable. That they're not as good as. And this is why I'm saying schools can't be a war zone for our kids. You sent me an urgent message. Okay. I'm not going to be in the office until tomorrow. It's the weekend, so it's going to have to wait until tomorrow. But if you have a question about education, you can type it in or you can call in. People, ain't nobody called the phone number. Nobody has any questions. That's not a cell phone, honey. It's a business line. Hi, Assassin. Welcome back. Okay, so, when we do these discussions, just as a reminder, that every Wednesday and Sunday, we do have a topic, but if you have a personal question regarding education, you can definitely jump right in and ask that question, even if it's not on topic, right? And this is for educators, this is for parents, this is for students. If you're having an issue or if you want to highlight something great that's going on, let us know. And you can do that by typing in. You can do that now by calling in 203-306-9833, Little Pearl Education Group. You can send me an email, or email is better than direct message because I don't always get to go in my direct messages. There's so much spam and direct messages that email is actually better. And our email, I gotta put that in the description box. Our email is info@littlepearleducationgroup.com. I gotta make sure I put that. Sorry. Okay. Got it. Okay. So, the synopsis is, yes, Latinos are discriminated in the U.S. education system. Point blank, period. Right? And so this is not about dogging out the U.S. education system. It's not about dogging out educators. It's not about dogging out schools. It's about exposure and problem solving. So make sure that people have the information and the strategies that they need. Now, I did upload part 1 of the summer series to help your kids have a successful 2019-2020 school year, because planning is perfect vision, 2020 vision for your families and your kids. Hey, Rock. Hi, F. Burrow. Hi, Gev. And so check out that series. It's on the Facebook page, and I'm going to be uploading the other ones. It's a 4. Thank you, Rock. It's a 4-part series, and so I give strategies for parents to make sure that they are planning and organizing to make sure that their kids have a successful school year. And you have to start early. Hi, Dana. Long time no see. You have to make sure that you start planning early, right? Because then, you know, after you bought all the school supplies and you bought all the back to school clothes, uniforms and shoes, and you sign them up for soccer and dance and cheerleading and football and all that, you're doing your thing as a parent. The next thing you know, you're getting calls, right? And you want to avoid that. Right? And so in this summer series, I give parents tips on what they can do to make sure that those kids have a successful year. The second part, I was trying to get it fixed. The video and the sound was off. The camera froze. And so no one could put it back together. And so that's how I got behind. And then I was out of town and went to edit the other 2 videos, and I sent it to myself via iCloud. And then the, expired every time I went to go edit it. So those have to be recent and edited, and then I'll upload those. So look for those. And I am actually going to start writing blogs as well, so that you can have time to really dissect this information, you know, whenever you have a good read, or send it to parents that you know that it pertains to. We are starting Terrific Teacher Tuesday. So if you know of an example of a teacher that has met, or educator, it could be a lunch lady, it could be a secretary, it could be a principal, it could be, you know, superintendent, it could be a, you know, anyone within education, right, that has had a positive impact on you. On Tuesdays, we are just going to love them up, whether you have a picture, whether it's a story, or whatever the case may be. Hi, Fat. We're going to love them up on Tuesdays. So send those to the email info@littleproeducationgroup.com. And we're giving out, child, this is that Throwback Teacher Thursday. So again, it could be any type of educator, because we're all in this together. If you know of an example of something that is challenging and you want to make sure you educate people on this, and again, it's not about throwing people underneath the bus, because, you know, as a company, I'm definitely not going to, you know, for Throwback Teacher Thursday, I'm not going to expose their name. I'll probably black out the person's name. because it's just a one-sided situation. But what's important is exposing, you know, some of the things that can be derogatory towards having the most beneficial education for all students, right? And so exposing the issues is really important. And some of those best, you know, issues are in anecdotes, they're in stories. They're in people's actual experiences. So definitely email us and let us know your experiences. We're gonna throw back. We're gonna throw them back. Not throw it back in terms of having a long time ago. We're gonna throw it back to where it belongs. Where? Like Whitney said, back there. All right, everybody. That's it for tonight. Look for us on Wednesday for Woke Wednesdays, and then we're gonna play around with Fridays and Saturdays to see what's what, right? Because when people are, you know, up on Saturday, you know, morning, afternoon, we might try a few of those. So we will see. Thanks so much for all your participation. Absolutely love it. You guys are awesome. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. And see you later. Periscope, I can never get rid of you. Oh my gosh, I didn't end the video. I was watching Taylor Girls. Sister had on a wig. 4-inch wear, baby. 4-inch wear. Y'all was talking all that time saying I got a 4-inch. Got caught. It's a 50. Y'all still talking about new comment. Can I get a 20-inch? Y'all still begging, baby. This 50, 60, 70. Thanks, Ricky. Great knowledge, and maybe we can have a discussion one day. Awesome, Ricky. I look forward to it. Okay, I was supposed to click out, and y'all caught me like watching Instagram video. All right, see y'all later.